Space is a graveyard, not just of ships but of dreams. Out here, most of us are chasing scraps, the leftovers of corporate feasts. Action Industries, a mega-corporation, owns half the colonies and flies ships like polished predators, gleaming chrome cutting through the void. But in the Barnard star system, far enough from the core for communication relays to turn unreliable, even action is just another ghost story. This is the Black Drift, a vast expanse where signals vanish, ships go missing, and whispers of pirates and alien threats haunt every conversation. Personally, I used to think it was just the void, unforgiving and endless. That was before the Haven won. The Nova Mariner is home, though just barely. The ship has been patched together more times than I can count, its deck plating a patchwork of metals, each groaning under the strain of holding entropy at bay. We're scavengers, eking out a living in the shadow of Action's empire. My crew isn't family, but we're bound together by the thin line between survival and oblivion. Andrew, the pilot, is a hothead with a clunky prosthetic leg he's always cursing. Doc, our cynical medic, patches us up with expired pharmaceuticals and salvaged equipment. Clara, ex-corporate security, is our muscle. Her silence is a shield for something she won't talk about. Sparky, the kid, is an electronics genius, though too green for a place like this. Then there's me, Gabriel, the captain. Blacklisted by Action after a choice that saved lives but cost me my career, I'm left scraping by on the edge of nowhere. The day started like any other, tightening bolts on a coolant pipe in the engine room, while Andrew cursed at the failing thrusters. Then the long-range scanner pinged, faint, intermittent, but big. Andrew's voice buzzed over the comms. "Captain, you seeing this? That's no rock. Looks like a derelict. Could be a big score." Desperation, our constant companion, gnawed at my resolve. We were running low on food, fuel, even breathable air. Against my better judgment, I ordered, "Plot a course. Let's take a closer look." As we approached, the object resolved on the forward view screen, a cylindrical structure kilometers long, its central section rotating lazily. Scarred, pitted, and covered in ice, it was unmistakably a ship, and an old one. "It's the Haven 1, Clara said, her voice cold. Action colony ship. Lost over a century ago. Part of the Genesis project. The name sent a chill through me. Haven 1 was a legend, a cautionary tale whispered in spacer bars. A colony ship full of settlers in cryosleep, vanished without a trace. The ship's silence was suffocating as we docked. The damaged hatch creaked open under the mechanical arm's strain, revealing a dark labyrinth beyond. Suited up, we entered cautiously, our helmet lights cutting through the gloom. Inside, the ship was a tomb. Empty corridors, frozen mess halls, and silent labs bore witness to a century of abandonment. Yet something was wrong. The temperature was rising, and faint heat signatures flickered on our scanners. "Doc, Sparky, you're with me to the bridge." "Andrew, Clara, check the engineering section," I ordered. The bridge was a shadow of its former glory, its main view screen cracked and auxiliary monitors flickering. Sparky accessed the ship's logs, pulling up fragmented files. "Got something," he said. "Personal logs from the chief medical officer. They found something on a moon they were surveying. Something alive." The screen flickered to a recording of Dr. Price, the chief medical officer, his face pale with fear. "Day 47, Price began, his voice trembling. "We found it encased in ice on the third moon. It was dormant, crystalline, but alive. When we thawed it, it woke up, infected one of the crew. It changes them, rewrites their DNA. We tried to contain it, but it's spreading. The only way to stop it is cold." Then the lights died, plunging us into darkness. Doc's voice crackled over the comms, laced with urgency. "Captain, the cryopods are thawing. The ship is diverting all power to the heating systems. It's deliberate. We entered the cryopod bay and froze. Hundreds of pods stretched across the cavernous chamber, their glass lids fogged with condensation. A steady drip echoed in the stifling air as frost melted from the walls. And then I saw them. The colonists within the pods were no longer human, not entirely. Veins of crystalline latticework had replaced flesh and blood, forming a grotesque network beneath translucent skin. Eyes that should have been closed in peaceful slumber were open and staring, but they weren't human anymore. They were multifaceted, like a swarm of insects trapped behind glass. The pods trembled as the figures inside convulsed, their limbs twitching unnaturally. Clara's voice was low, almost reverent in its horror. "It's the parasite. It's waking them." A faint, scratching sound pulled my attention to the floor. Emerging from the shadows were crystalline creatures no larger than my arm, their movements unnatural, jerky, and spasmodic. They scraped against the deck plating, the sound like nails on a coffin lid. Sparky's panicked voice broke through. "Captain, the AI's locked us out. It's overriding every system. The temperature's still rising fast. We've got to get out of here." The creatures in the pods twitched harder, their hands pressing against the fogged glass. Thin cracks began to spiderweb across the surfaces. "Grab supplies and move," I ordered, forcing my legs to obey. "We leave now." We bolted through the maze of corridors toward the engineering section, but the heat had grown oppressive, the air shimmering in waves. The ship groaned around us like a dying beast. Then, from the haze it emerged. Towering over us, the crystalline monstrosity stood over 3 meters tall. Its limbs were long and angular, tipped with jagged edges that glinted like razors. It moved with an eerie grace, the structure of its body constantly shifting glass melding seamlessly into jagged metal. "Run!" I shouted, but Andrew stood his ground, his energy pistol raised. He fired, the shots sparking harmlessly against the creature's carapace. It surged forward with impossible speed. A crystalline limb speared through Andrew's chest, lifting him into the air like a broken marionette. He gasped, blood spraying inside his visor as his prosthetic leg spasmed violently. The creature's other limb wrapped around the prosthetic, integrating it into its grotesque body as if it were absorbing him. Then, with a sickening crunch, it snapped his body in two and flung the remains aside like discarded waste. "Andrew!" Sparky screamed, but there was no time to mourn. The creature turned its faceted gaze toward us, its limbs quivering with hunger. "Go!" I yelled, dragging Sparky by his collar. Clara fired as we retreated, but her rifle sputtered out its energy cell completely drained. She hurled it at the creature, the impact a futile clink of metal on glass. The corridors twisted around us as we ran, the sound of skittering parasites growing louder with every step. My lungs burned as we reached the airlock. The Nova Mariner loomed ahead, our lifeline in the endless black. Clara and Doc scrambled aboard while I hit the emergency override on the docking clamps. Behind us, crystalline parasites swarmed into the corridor, their reflective bodies catching the dim emergency lights. Clara shattered one with the butt of a salvaged wrench, but more took its place, their insectal limbs clawing toward the open airlock. "Close it," she screamed, and I slammed the panel. The airlock hissed shut just as a crystalline limb scraped against the door. I stumbled into the cockpit, gasping for breath. "Sparky, get us out of here." The Nova Mariner lurched as its engines roared to life. I watched through the viewport as the docking clamps disengaged, leaving Haven 1 to its fate. The derelict ship receded into the void, a dark, hulking silhouette. But even from this distance, I could see them parasites swarming its surface, spreading across the hull like a living infection. Haven 1 was no longer a ship. It was an incubator. I sat in the cockpit, staring at the endless stars, my hands trembling against the console. Andrew was gone, his scream still echoing in my ears. We had escaped, but the cost was too high. Behind us, the Haven 1 floated in silence, but I knew better. It wasn't dead. It was awake now, and the parasites were alive, spreading their icy terror. Clara stepped into the cockpit, her voice soft but resolute. "It's not over, is it?" "No," I said, my voice hollow. "It's just beginning." We drifted further into the black drift, the weight of our failure pressing down on us. Somewhere in the dark, Haven 1 remained a harbinger of the horrors that lay in the void, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't just fled the nightmare. We were bringing it with us.